Welcome to the Revenue Rewired podcast, hosted by StringCan Interactive's visionary CEO, Jay Feitlinger, and no-nonsense COO, Sarah Shepard. We're here to accelerate your revenue and give your marketing purpose. Hello, and welcome everybody to this next episode of the Revenue Rewired podcast. Morning, Jay.
How are you doing, Sarah? You ready
I'm
for your trip?
good. Yes. I don't know. I'm glad I took a month to prepare because I don't feel as stressed, but I think it was very stressful. I had to order some sandals. Like, I do not have good shoes. And I'm like, all right, I need walking sandals. Like, you can't just bring sandals to go to the beach. That's dumb. Every shoe needs a purpose. I ordered these shoes sight unseen. They were only available online, but they looked like they would work. The reviews were lovely. And you know what? They are comfortable. I'm wearing them today, and fingers crossed. That is like a rarity. Buying shoes online that are comfortable, that you're going to take and walk a bajillion miles. Wish me luck.
You crack me up. But tell everyone where you're going.
I am going to France and Italy to work remote for a couple months, 2 months, and take some time off this time in there, which I'm really looking forward to.
Good,
That'll
good for
be
you.
that'll be nice. Like usually I just work the whole time, but I really was intentional about picking very slow paced places, which was and I don't know if you would do this, Jay, or how you all feel as like the listeners. When you choose to take time off, do you pack it full of stuff and then you kind of leave a little tired and worn out? Or do you purposely choose to try to get some boredom into your life? And that's what I'm doing is like completely stopping the momentum of everything I have going on. And I'm going to a town where everything Claude tells me about it is you could walk from end to end in less than 20 minutes. There's maybe
Wow.
a handful of restaurants. I think there's maybe two or three hotels, but it's where Claude Monet got his fame in Giverny. And that was the
Hmm.
point of going is I want no distractions and I want to sit and be like inspired like he was. And so, in order to do that, I have to have nothing to do to distract me from my purpose. And I'm intrigued by this perspective going away and how it's going to work for me.
I'm loving that. I mean, again, you know me. I in the past I've always been over planner. In this last trip I did when we went to Sicily for a few weeks, we planned nothing, and I have to say, what you're planning on doing, I found a lot of value in. It's just nice to wake up and have no schedule to follow, and you just kind of wing it and you explore, and it's more like you're a traveler, not a tourist.
Yeah, I wanted options, but I don't want to be driven by check boxes.
Interesting.
And honestly, I think as humans, the hardest part about vacation for a lot of us in travel is it feels just so finite that we have to cram so much into it versus less is more. Can I experience it in a more profound way? And I saw this article recently that said for every photo you take on a trip, your connection with that experience drops by like a half a minute. It was somehow tied into time, but it was
And being
interesting that,
present.
yeah, that was exactly it. And
Yep.
I wish I had
I
the
love it.
source. My bad.
Actually, a kind of
But
nice segue into our topic today.
yes, why don't you kick it off this time?
Oh, wow. That's kind of scary. Um, so when me and Sarah were talking today, we love obviously using recent situations to kind of help us think about topics. And basically, this is all about, the one thing. And it's mirrored off of, the whole like EOS type of model where, when you are meeting with your various different team members, and there's no one better to give you feedback on what's going well and not from a personal, development perspective, than in theory the people you work with day in and day out. And I know it's been one of the areas that causes sometimes the most amount of angst in these meetings. And reflecting on that, in the past we've had some challenges around this topic because we have a culture of such high level of care that I think people were so worried about hurting people's feelings, and we were being too kind and just being surface level on this stuff. And I think it's just very unhealthy. And honestly, in my mind, what I learned from that is, yes, we were being too kind, but I think it was because of lack of trust. And obviously, we can probably debate that. There was definitely a good level of trust within our company for the last 16 years across all of our teams. But in my opinion, if people aren't comfortable in sharing how they truly feel from a place of care, I feel like they're doing a disservice to themselves, the person, and the organization. And so, me and Sarah want to talk about that a little bit because we just went through our quarterly planning process, which Sarah, you facilitated again as a rock star. I know it's probably one of the hardest roles of having to not only facilitate our team, but also to be present and adding value into into those conversations. But again, what we do, what I guess the process we have in place that we do is we have each person going around and be like, "This is what I'm so appreciative of you, and for us to be an elite organization, here is what I would like to see you do over the next quarter." So I'll pause there. Anything you want to add to that, Sarah?
Yeah, I think, the exercise, and I'll figure out, I'll look up and like give credit where credit's due with this one. But Sky also introduced this exercise many years ago. And I think what the reason why Jay and I want to talk about it today, obviously the podcast is about revenue. And part of that conversation always comes to like top-down decision making and leadership skills and, are still the most popular podcast topic we've done was our integrator visionary relationship. Having that conversation. And I think that one has yielded a lot of interesting feedback in terms of it kind of trickles into this conversation where a lot of owners, CEOs, founders really struggle with the amount of trust that's needed to have a second in command or have an integrator work with them. And part of that is, uh, you have to trust is a two-way street. So I had a conversation with a friend last week, and she was really struggling with another friend where the conversation was like dead. If she wasn't driving it, it wasn't happening. And I said, well, that's really interesting because she, for some reason, is feeling unable to share vulnerabilities with you, which is how you absorb those, respond to it, and then offer, any kind of direction after that. And it's a give and take, a back and forth. And when someone isn't able to share a vulnerability, in my, non-medical opinion, I think it's really hard to get trust going in a relationship. And even backing up, like last week when we had quarterly planning, you and I always get into it a little bit. Like we have conflicting opinions on things, believe it or not, guys. But
Hmm.
that's part of what makes it work, though. But I was thinking that night how nice it is that the next day it's like you and I don't have any residue from those conversations. And I think it's because it's a high trust environment. And you and I
Hmm.
have built that through vulnerability, acceptance, response, and you move on. And so integrating that into your leadership team or even just your team in general, is a whole nother level. And so, like, Jay, give the listeners an example. Maybe if you remember what you shared, I'd love for you to make me the guinea pig on air and just say, like, how does this one thing exercise work?
Do you want me to use you or someone else on the team
Use
that
me.
did it
Use
for?
me.
Okay,
Yeah.
because what's funny is the one thing for you this time, I think it's going to seem like a bigger disconnect around the whole kind of like operational or revenue side. But I think people that know us and how much we believe in, prioritizing, focusing on your work or life balance and that kind of stuff. But, since you invited me to share it, my one thing for you was.
Well, wait, go back up and tell us, how does the process start?
Okay, so essentially, which I kind of high level explain, but the idea around it is when we go into quarterly planning, we do some reflection exercises. And again, I love the way Sarah does this. Typically, like you can do it with like an online form or however the process you want to use for the vehicle to capture the data. But you give each person the opportunity to really spend some time on reflecting on kind of the whole entire quarter around goals, your focus areas or rocks, if you're doing EOS, that kind of stuff. And then one of the areas of the form is okay, now go through each of the people that are going to be attending that meeting, and you're obligated to really, dig deep and basically share again. It's kind of like a one, positive recognition, and then one opportunity for personal development, with the mindset of this is going to not only help that person, the team they're part of, the organization, and the clients we support. So you're trying to give it from that kind of perspective. It shouldn't be like, I wish you wore nicer clothes. Unless there was some business reason around that, because maybe if you're a slob and it makes clients uncomfortable, that's a whole nother silly comment. That's really what the process is. And so you kind of go around the room, and then each person is the one to accept the information. Everyone goes around the room and shares the story. The person accepting the feedback has the opportunity to ask questions, and then to, communicate their thoughts around it. And then we're all done. We basically kind of all do a recap and say, okay, for the next quarter, here's the one thing that I'm going to focus on. And then what we kind of love about that whole process then is that, we do like a typical mid-quarter check-in regarding how we're doing against that. And then we kind of talk about that when we do our quarterly reflection regarding here's our one thing, and, the progress we made or obstacles we ran into. It's, one of the things that I have come to love the most. I used to explain it similar, almost like a bee sting, which, that first little bit you get, it could feel like it hurts. But if you do have a real level of trust within your team, I think the person that's, taking the feedback should look at it from the perspective of this person was brave enough to share how they really feel. And I need to be brave enough to accept it and understand it, because, that is their truth. That's their reality. And, as long as I know that the person is doing it from a place of care, it's so welcomed. And so I know for me, it's, every once in a while I'm surprised by some of the feedback that I've received about, for myself. But gosh, do I love it now. And I get a little nervous sometimes because you don't know what people are going to say. But I would say almost like 9 out of 10 times when the various team members are communicating it to me, I leave those conversations with such clarity around the things that my team feels are important, for me to help kind of move the needle around my personal role within the organization and where I need to invest energy. And then maybe there's some places where people have been maybe uncomfortable to share some of this during, in a timely fashion. And so they might be harboring some of that over a few weeks of conversation. And so obviously you always can go back to the person and have a deeper dive if you want to better understand context. But again, I think it's a really amazing process.
All right, now give it to me.
So I think for you, Sarah has have been having, some health stuff going on. And again, she's been very vulnerable about that, sharing with us because she wanted us to know that, she's human and not a robot. And as she's having some of this stuff, it does make, parts of her job a little harder to do. And so, my feedback, it was all about that for her this time. Because again, my perspective is, a healthy Sarah is a healthier business for StringCan. Because obviously, Sarah, good or bad, you're an extremely critical role to the organization's health. And if you aren't healthy, how should we expect the company to be healthy? And so, my positive comment to you was how much I appreciate you've been so vulnerable, and sharing with us updates. And from my point of view, I don't feel like it's a complaining thing. Again, we all have had those people we know in our lives, that are have this kind of victim mentality. I think that bothers me to no end, which is why I worry that maybe me saying that's too much has maybe prevented you from maybe sharing sooner, some of the issues you've been struggling with. But I think you've been very forthcoming, especially with me over the last few weeks about some of these things that are going on. But then I said, from that point of view, often you'll communicate the concern and be like, it is what it is. I got to move on. And I still got all of these responsibilities I need to do for myself and for the company. And my comment back to you for us to be more of an elite organization is that you've got to make it a priority to take care of yourself. And we are here for you to lean on and take some of that, weight off your shoulders because you don't have to bear it all by yourself. You're not living on an island. That's the benefit of having a team. And I think us going around and having these conversations and you hearing that from us, I feel like you found that of value. One, that you know that you're being heard, that you're in pain and going through some of this personal stuff. But two is that we wanted to remind you that we're here to support you. Now, if you choose to accept that help is a whole nother conversation. But it seemed like you were very open to it. And so now that it's out there, now we can kind of move on and talk through what we can do to help you.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing because I know it's like hard to remember what we said. And the reason why we wanted to talk about this is because feedback is it's a hard conversation. And I have typically been someone who has really struggled with accepting feedback, even hearing feedback, preparing for feedback. I used to be terrified of our annual reviews, which I'll never forget. Like you used to say, I don't give full tens. I don't give straight tens. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm
Nonsense.
already terrified. Um, but you are kind of setting the expectation that there's always work to do and places to grow, and I will be forthcoming in that. And I appreciated that. And even though I still dreaded it, knowing I was doing a good job, I think what's changed for me about this particular process is it's outside of formal reviews. And it's saying one thing I appreciate about you and one thing you can do to make this company more elite is saying, this is my perspective. And then the person gets to choose based on all the people they heard from. If it's four people, you can choose one or a theme or make up your own. Because chances are you already know some of the things these people are going to say. But what I've loved about this is it's never as bad as the story in your head. The
Hmm.
things that you are most concerned someone's going to bring up are not the things that they bring up. You have so much going on. And if you're a high performer, perfectionist person, you have a never ending list of your F ups and the things you want to do better. And this helps you understand where your team needs you the most. And I think this is one of the biggest trust builders in leadership teams is saying, I recognize your human side. Here's some appreciation, but also there's one thing. And that one thing, one of the pieces of feedback I gave someone was take time off. Dude, like live by example. You got to like take care of yourself too. And, blah, blah, blah. And it was, I think, helpful for people to hear, I care about you. But what's unique about this is the acceptance is just as much of a trust builder as being able to say it with kindness. And so you really look the person in the eye and you have to hear it as they have to say it with care and appreciation. And we've been doing this probably every quarter for, I don't know, what would you say, like maybe five years or so.
Oh, elite. I,
So
I would say it's more like 6 or 7, but it's
I
been
was
at
gonna
least
say
5 years.
6, but I feel like my brain and time with COVID is totally screwed up. But all right, so let's say we've done it maybe 20 plus times.
Yep.
This last time was the first time I actually looked forward to it because of the people in the room. And it's what made Jay and I want to talk about this as a topic today is that how can you really get to know how much trust is truly in your leadership team? Because if you're looking to launch like a new initiative, a brand rollout, change your strategy, new product, new service, even a new leadership team member, it's a great way to see where the foundation of trust is in your organization because the owner leader is also taking part in this. How are they receiving this information? And I think it's like an open door policy in action. People can say this all day long, but nothing terrifies someone more than wanting to give a leader feedback and then them receiving it like you're a total idiot. I don't believe you. I don't want to listen to this. Thanks, but no thanks. Um, that's my perspective on it too, is also for me personally, it's a little bit of a gut ego check. And I have been working on my ego very recently. And I think that was an aha for me that my ego was not bruised by that conversation.
I love
I
that.
was so grateful to hear where people thought my time was best spent. And while you're saying taking care of myself, honestly, a lot of women, I think, need to hear that too from other people that it's okay to take care of yourself. If you don't feel right, that's not normal. It's okay to take care of yourself and make that a priority.
Well, I think, reflecting on that, the last 2 quarters, one of our leadership team members, both meetings, if you remember, he said, gosh, this was a part of the quarterly planning I've always dreaded the most. In the last couple quarters, similar to what you said before, is one of the areas he is looking most forward to. And I was curious. I was kind of asking the question why. And it's like, I've never worked at a company that invested so much energy into caring so much to give an opportunity for people across peers to share feedback. Again, the feedback I've heard from them is more often than not, and again, the larger the company is, unfortunately, the more, toxic this conversation could get. But more often than not, it's like if you have a large team that you're managing, um, people that are a little maybe passive aggressive or not confident or didn't have the right, managerial developments don't know how to have these chats and they often want to avoid conflict. And so his, comment back was, people would come to me and, they might communicate some concerns. And then all of a sudden, when the opportunity comes up to have these kind of radical candor, run to danger type conversations, they don't bring it up. And that's when I reflect on, back to Scott, who helped facilitate a lot of this for us for many years. We I would expect, person A to say this about person Y because they would keep complaining to me about that. And then when it came up and we were in a room together, they would say some surface level thing. And so finally, we were brave enough to really push back and be like, guys, if we're not going to take this seriously, let's not do this. And I wasn't being a baby when we were pushing back on that. Now, again, I think it's partly the maturity of the team and partly the owners leading by example. But what I wanted to share real fast is for those that aren't doing this today, and this sounds like this might be a really intriguing way to, break down the wall between your team and start having some much more honest and open dialogue. What I'm thinking and reflecting is it might be good, especially for new team members, to practice this maybe with them in weekly check-ins or something, because I think once you do this a few times, it becomes a lot less scary. And I think for me, what I'm only scared about is it being like surface level nonsense. Like I
I knew
don't
you were
need
going to
to,
say like super,
yeah,
I don't want superficial.
exactly. I guess for me, I love to grow. I feel like I'm always needing to improve myself, both personally and professionally. And I can't imagine getting feedback from anyone else besides the people that I work the most with to understand me that can add some sensitivity to it. Be like, hey, and not that I want excuses, but they understand how I operate and what my strengths and weaknesses are. And so when those people are brave enough to give me really honest dialogue, I just beyond welcome it. And it does, I find for me, really motivate and inspire me to be like, okay, I really embrace that. Now, I don't have to accept it all. That's why I do love the opportunity at the end where each person, like I mentioned before, has the chance to come back and say, from everything I've heard from this room, here is what I'm going to agree to. And then that is what my one thing is. So far, we've never had a situation where we're like, wait, you didn't really hear what we said, right? So far it's been working well, but that's the part I wanted to share is that I think some people that haven't experienced this kind of, tough love type conversations, they might need some, role playing or coaching before they're doing it the first time because it can be a little intimidating the first few times you do it.
Yeah, and let's, honestly, this took us a while, I think, to get to this place. It's taken what, almost 2 dozen iterations with
Yep.
different individuals, but even with this team, we've done it maybe 4 or 5 times. No, yeah, about 5 times. And it just gets better. So, like anything, you have to practice. And if you also have leaders where they aren't really part of your formal review process, like maybe they're, you and I don't do that anymore. We were like, okay, we meet enough and we're open enough with each other that we do field feedback in real time. And so, for those who are maybe not able to get that FaceTime, if it's like a COO, CEO duo, and you're part of the leadership team with others and they don't have a peer feedback system, I think this is a really great way to give them an opportunity. And you yourself, as a leader, are given the chance to show them how you receive feedback. So, don't expect them to just swallow it if you yourself cannot. So nothing bothers me more in business than hypocrisy in leadership. If you can't take feedback, then you should not be giving it, in my opinion.
I
And
love
same thing
that.
goes with the work. If you don't understand how the work is done, you shouldn't be leading it. And, light me up in the comments if you disagree. I'd love to hear your perspective. But I really think that practicing feedback, giving and receiving in leadership is probably one of the biggest trust building opportunities you can do to build a serious revenue engine organization.
What's interesting on that point, I remember we had one staff member I came to me and was like, I wish this was more like a document that people got. And I'm like, if you have to hide behind a document and you aren't able to bravely say the things to that person, then then either we have a trust and a respect problem. Because that person deserves to hear the tone and the context and be able to ask some questions if they aren't fully understanding. And I just started thinking about that a little bit, like where I think this could be really interesting is I've seen so many organizations that might have some kind of silly, annual review, passive aggressive process. I hate, as you know, Sarah, annual reviews because it's not timely, nor does it seem like it's relevant enough. But I know one organization where they'll have the sales team write up some feedback for marketing, and the marketing team will do the same thing. So it's fair back to the sales team. And then they each read these reports, and all it does is harbor more toxic culture. And I started thinking about it. I'm like, gosh, can you imagine if a organization truly had a high level of trust and the team was working well together? And there's probably two departments that I can't imagine that more important than have to be working together is the sales and marketing departments. If there was some kind of cool process where the sales and marketing team maybe had like a quarterly meeting themselves and they really were like, how can we help each other? How can we support each other? And they do this one thing. I think that really alone could break down so many barriers that that people believe that there's out there with the sales and marketing departments with finger pointing. That I think these conversations alone could significantly help. And that's why I just love it because I just feel like having these tough conversations, it does open up so much opportunity for growth.
Agreed. All right. Well, that's all we have for today's podcast. So email us questions or angry notes at podcast@stringcaninteractive.com. And we look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thanks, Jay.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks for tuning in to the Revenue Rewired podcast. Send us your questions to podcast@stringcaninteractive.com and follow us for more insights to drive your business forward.